It's our Miami Dolphins preview. Their offseason in 60 seconds. Extended Zach Sealer, 3 years, $64 million, $43 guaranteed. Acquired Minkah Fitzpatrick in trading for Jalen Ramsey. Got Darren Waller to come out of retirement. Signed James Daniels, 3 years, $24 million, $11 million guaranteed to play guard for them. Smaller deals for Tyrell Dotson, who they retained. Zach Wilson, forgot that happened. Nick Westbrook-Akina and Ife Melifonwu. Lost Javon Holland and Calais Campbell in free agency. They drafted Kenneth Grant, 13th overall, and guard Jonas Savaiinaea in the second round, 37th overall, after trading up for him. Dave, what are you most excited about watching with the 2025 Miami Dolphins?
I think on this show and in the NFL sphere in general, the Dolphins are a little bit of a punching bag right now, and we're going to get into a lot of the reasons why.
I want to be clear about this. I do not necessarily think they're bad. I just don't know what to make of them, and I just am confused by them. That's where I sit with this.
Even if we don't think they're bad, I think a lot of people are just in general like, what the hell's going on with the Dolphins?
There's bewilderment, even if there's some hope for elements of this team.
Bewilderment is a generous term for me, but yes.
So if you're a Dolphins fan, even if you're a rational Dolphins fan, you're probably a little annoyed at hearing that nobody thinks your team is capable of doing anything. So I will just throw this olive branch out there because we got plenty of critical stuff to say. But if Tua's healthy and the majority of the pass catchers are healthy, like if one of the two of Tyreek or Waddle is healthy, preferably both, the running backs. I'm so glad you mentioned Nick Westbrook-Akina, Robert. I feel like it's flying under the radar that the deep ball god is in Miami now. So with all of that there, if they're all available, like the Dolphins will be entertaining. Like they will be able to score points. They will be a fun team, and that's exciting. Like I like to watch touchdowns, and I think they'll score plenty of them.
When Tua has been healthy since 2022 when Mike McDaniel got there, this team has averaged 6.3 yards per play. They have a 46.2% success rate on offense, and they've averaged 0.09 EPA per play. For context, the yards per play and success rate would rank first in the NFL over that stretch, and they would be second in EPA per play. When he has been healthy, this has been one of the best offenses in the league, any metric that you want to look at over the course of the regular season. And that's kind of what I was excited about is I want to watch the next Mike McDaniel Houdiniac that he's going to pull. Like every single offseason, when you think about them not really changing who they are and kind of frustratingly doubling down on this, it feels like him stringing himself up in a straitjacket and having to get out of it. It's his own doing. Like, they're doing this to themselves, but he's still able to consistently wiggle his way out. Last year, the ways that they shifted that offense because of how teams were playing against them, they faced more cloud coverages last season per next gen than any team in football. It was 35.5% of dropbacks. No other team in the league was above 30%. The difference between them and the Vikings at number 2 was bigger than the difference between the Vikings and the Jags, who finished 17th. And so because of this, because of the environment they know they're having to work in, they were dead last in the NFL in air yards per attempt. They were one of 2 teams with negative air yards to the sticks on third down to have finished second in the NFL in dropback success rate last year. Like their ability to consistently find these little crevices to continue being good on offense despite their limitations. We noticed the limitations by the end of the year, but the process of working around them, Derrik, I'm consistently impressed by.
They are the best team in the league, I think, at getting to the wild card graphic. I think that's the best way that I can frame this team. Does anything after that matter for them? I'm not really convinced. But in terms of like being able to get there, they are probably the best team in the league. I'm really excited for it because it's never the same thing. Obviously, like at first it was a lot of the cheat motion stuff was kind of their big thing. And then like kind of last year it became, or even the year before, it became a lot of like the different ball handling stuff that they were doing.
Yep.
They'd started to go to more pistol at certain points because they realized we couldn't really get under center. One, with our quarterback, I don't think he loves that, but then also just the offensive line, I think with the way that the run game was going to work, they didn't want to get under center and be that way. So like they've just always found these different little ways to shift. I mean, even last year, obviously Jonnu Smith isn't on the roster now, but part of why they went to such a low ADOT type of offense was they realized like, okay, with the way defenses are playing us, the best way to get to a ball to a decent skill player is to throw to Jonnu Smith immediately. And they did a really good job of pivoting to that. So again, Mike McDaniel does not just Mike McDaniel, but like Chris Greer and the whole thing, they kind of back themselves into a corner with the way that the roster is constructed, but he always finds some way to make it work, and he's probably going to do it again.
And I'm excited about seeing what that looks like on offense, even if it does bump up against some limitations. For me, what I'm excited about is this defensive front, if everybody is healthy. And I know that's a massive caveat because of how many games Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb have missed over the last few years. But with all those guys on the field, I think this could be an incredibly fun unit. Chop Robinson already looks like a star, like, period. On a rate basis last year per PFF, here are the players that were more disruptive as pass rushers than Chop Robinson: Aiden Hutchinson, Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, Trey Hendrickson, Nick Bosa. That's it. It's the end of the list. And he had 350 pass rush snaps last year. This is not like a part-time player who was really productive despite a lack of volume. He was on the field a lot, and he was really good. Derrik, for me, it's like I watch him, and he's not huge, but he's not, his lower half is so strong, and he plays with so much power for somebody that's not overwhelming in size. And that's just not what I anticipated from him after watching him at Penn State. But he will play right through a guy's chest. And when you watch all the stunts that they use and just how creative Anthony Weaver's pressure packages are, he's a real weapon. And so when you combine that with Phillips, Chubb, Kenneth Grant, which I did not love Kenneth Grant as much as some of the other interior players in this class, but I can understand the appeal of him, and he had some really nice flashes in the preseason so far. And Zach Sealer is still here. Like, there are a lot of guys to potentially work with for a defensive coordinator that I think deploys those pressure looks in a way that is as dynamic as anybody in the league right now.
This is going to sound dumb, but the reason I think Chop is really good is he's the exact type of player I usually don't gravitate towards, where he's a little bit smaller. All he wants to do is win around the arc, and he can run through you if he needs to, but he is mostly a guy who's going to try to get around the arc. But like, he's awesome. You watch him, and he is just consistently finding a way to the quarterback. Like, he's a player that I've really come to enjoy. So I think if he can continue to be like a really explosive presence for them around the edge, that does a lot because he's different than the other guys that they have, right? Like Jalen Phillips, I think is at his best a little more of like a do-it-all. Like, I think he's a really good athlete, but he can go through you. He has inside moves. He has outside moves. Bradley Chubb is obviously a little bit bigger and kind of definitely wants to play through guys. Matthew Judon, if, whatever we're going to get from him is also that style of player similar to Bradley Chubb. So the fact that Chop Robinson is very clearly their race car type of pass rusher, I think if he can kick it up a notch, I'm extremely excited.
This could be one of the very best pass rushes in the NFL. And
No doubt.
It
Yeah.
definitely is flying under the radar. Like, I'm not trying to sell you on the Dolphins as a Super Bowl contender, but it's not being talked about by very many people, I don't think.
It's hard not to treat this group as anything more than theoretical because those guys have just struggled to stay on the field. Like, we didn't see Bradley Chubb play football last year. And in theory, he should be healthy because he didn't play at all last year. But Jalen Phillips is, again, coming off of a torn ACL. Like, there's always something happening with this group. And so I'm excited about what it looks like in the best possible circumstances. It's just hard for me to believe in those circumstances considering how the last couple years have gone. Let's get to the swing points for the 2025 Miami Dolphins. Derrik, where in your mind does this Dolphins season potentially pivot?
Well, we talked a little bit already about like what is the new pitch for McDaniel? What is he going to do? I think a lot of that, when you look at the roster, is going to have to boil down to what do we get from these two new guards? Because I think last year the biggest issue was the offense was the interior especially couldn't like move people and they couldn't run the way that they wanted to. There was no diversity, no power. So what they did was they went and signed James Daniels, who at his best can move people, and drafted Jonas Avenea, who's a little bit of a bigger guard. And they really spent draft capital to make sure that what felt like to them the last, like, in that tier of guard, what they really needed to go get. So they have really made a concerted effort to really change not just the quality of player at guard, but the identity of what they have at guard. And that to me is like, if it goes well and James Daniel is healthy and we see some of the best of him and Savanea has at least like an average rookie year, those two would be massive upgrades from what we got out of that unit last year.
Dave, I can already tell based on what we saw in the preseason that your continuing frustration with what this team looks like in short yardage is already getting to you.
I keep saying that I'm trying not to be influenced by preseason and training camp, and maybe I'm just doing a bad job, but you watch them play the Bears, and they made it a point to play the ones after the joint practice, and they just got bullied on the goal line. And they made it a point to they were like, we're going to run 3 times from the 2-yard line. And we're going to get in that end zone. And the Bears were like, no, the hell you're not, with their second string. And that is so demoralizing. And then it happened again. They joint practiced against the Lions, and it sounded like a massacre at this training camp, the way Lions beat reporters were talking about it. They were like, the Dolphins are going to have to be taken out of here in ambulances. So we already know it was bad. They were dead last in the league in red zone success rate. They were 30% in red zone success rate, which is 16% below league average. They were so bad. And I know everything Derrik just laid out, but that is such a precipitous drop from how good they were in 2022 and 2023. It's like they just forgot elementary stuff. I don't know. Or maybe bulk and power really does matter that much when you get down there close to the goal line, but it's an untenable drop when you look at last year's numbers. I mean, they were bottom 3 in the league in everything. They scored 19 red zone touchdowns. We got to get these numbers up if I'm expected to take them seriously. It's crazy.
I think it matters a lot specifically for them because they don't have a quarterback who runs. They don't have backs who are like particularly powerful, and they don't have a ball winner. So how the hell else are you supposed to score in the red zone but run through people? But they couldn't do that either. So that's why I think it's like this really, really has to work.
Let's throw out some numbers about the 2024 Miami Dolphins run game. It's essentially the exact inverse of the passing game, and you'll see why here in a second. They were stuffed on 26.3% of their runs per next gen. No other team in the league was above 21%. The gap between them and the Texans at 31 was bigger than the gap between the Texans and the Niners, who were 13th.
Wow.
They were in their own zip code when it comes to this stuff. They also weren't explosive. They were below average in explosive run rate last year. And Derrik, why I was losing my mind when you were talking about them consistently getting pushed back in the run game. When you watch the run game, Mike McDaniel is generally considered one of the best run game designers in professional football. Like, the unique wrinkles that they have when they're trying to run the ball are unlike almost any other team in the league. All of this misdirection, all of the ball handling, tight ends slicing across the formation. None of that matters if you're getting pushed back a yard into the backfield on almost every single play. And that's what it looked like last year. They could not move people. They could not displace people. And it was just a non-starter for the run game overall. And so now you have these 2 bigger, more physical guards that hopefully are going to be able to displace more people in the run game. And let's throw Patrick Paul into the mix here too. He's coming in as the left tackle, and while he is a little bit raw when it comes to pass protection, and I do think that's worth thinking about, him and Savaiinaea in that Bears game, they had a double team where they were just moving that 3 technique off the ball. And so that, to me, is the best case scenarios. With Paul, Savaiinaea, James Daniels, you can just have a little bit more downhill physicality. The 2 things that give me pause with this. One, Devon Achane's already hurt. He's already probably going to miss the first game of the season and potentially more with the calf injury that he is dealing with. That is something we absolutely have to take into account because he is hugely important to the best case scenario for this team on offense. And the other part of it is the most frustrating element of that run game last year, as I was rewatching it this morning, wasn't even in the interior offensive lineman. The tight ends on this team are so bad in the run game, and their inability to hold up on the edge consistently did this team in last year. They didn't do anything about it. It's like the same group of guys. The tight end they went out and got this year is Darren Waller. You think Darren Waller is digging out edge rushers? Like that's not how this is going to work. So I do have hope about what the guards can do to the physicality of this offense. I still have concerns about some of the other ancillary pieces contributing to the identity this team is clearly chasing when they're trying to run the ball on their own terms.
I definitely agree with that. This was an offense that was incomplete in 5 ways last year. Hopefully it's only incomplete in like 2 ways this year, and then we can live with it that way.
Let's talk about what's keeping us up at night with the 2025 Dolphins. Derrik, why don't you kick us off? What is your source of anxiety with this Dolphins team? I'm sure there are several.
I mean, to be clear, there are several. There are a lot of things I worry about with this team. But the glaring one, the one in flashing red lights, is the secondary. It's all a bunch of guys who are, one, old and like weren't on the team last year. Like, it is a secondary that they have completely cobbled together outside of, the only guy who played any amount of serious snaps for them, who is paged to be starting for them this year, is Storm Duck. Storm Duck was an undrafted free agent last year, and he was okay. Everyone else, it's like Melifanu from the Lions, who I think we like as like a potential swing, but he got pushed out of the Lions rotation with injuries and them just having better players. Minka Fitzpatrick, who had a weird end to his Steelers thing and is now being reunited in Miami, which is also another weird thing. Kendall Sheffield from the New York Jets, and Mike Hilton, who, listen, I love Mike Hilton. Mike Hilton is very obviously on the wrong side of 30, and there's a potential that he just doesn't have it anymore. So this is just, it's an old cobbled together secondary that just, it's very hard to sell me on.
The best case scenario here, if I was trying to sell you on it, is that the pass rush is so good and they can play enough junk zone behind it. And Anthony Weaver, who I think is very good at this, and I think if you
He
look at the
is.
structure of that defense last year, he is a defensive coordinator that I feel good about him getting the best out of those pieces, even if we're not that excited about the pieces. Maybe if that's the version of the defense that you're talking about, and this is the best pass rush in football, can they get to average or slightly below average defensively? And can this offense be as good as it has been when Tua has been healthy? That formula is like a wild card team. That's the best case scenario, but I do think that's the path if we're trying to carve it out.
Are we sure the Dolphins aren't just the snowbird giants, like at least defensively? Because I feel like I have deja vu talking about the defense right now, where I'm like, this pass rush kicks ass. Don't look too hard at the secondary, but yeah.
At least the Giants have done something about it. The
That is
Giants
fair.
at least threw resources at the secondary.
No.
The Dolphins have not done that because they have no resources.
I
Right,
like the state of the Giants secondary more than the state of the Dolphins secondary, to be very clear.
Right, because like the big thing the Dolphins did with their secondary is like, oh, they got Minka Fitzpatrick. Well, you had to trade Jalen Ramsey away to do it, so that doesn't even really count as like we invested a bunch in it.
Yeah, I don't know what this is going to look like. And there are other teams that we'll talk about later. And I don't even want to mention the specific one I'm thinking of because I know the blowback that will happen where teams are like, their corners are terrible. I've seen corners on that team contribute to a good defense. This is all theoretical. Like Mike Hilton as a blitzer within this scheme, I get some of that. Like I do think him and Melifonwu, like there's a vision for probably how they want to deploy those guys and unleash them as pass rushers close to the line of scrimmage. Like I get some of it, but this team holding up in coverage, I think it's really hard to get there and talk yourself into it. What's keeping me up at night with this team is that the Dolphins as constructed, when we thought that they were like a contending team, they were a playoff team, they were already like a stars and scrubs roster. That's how this thing was built. They leveraged themselves for these guys. They traded a lot for Tyreek Hill. They traded a first-round pick for Nick Chubb. They paid Teron Armstead in free agency. Like this was already a fragile build and a needle that they were trying to thread. Well, there's still a stars and scrubs roster, but some of the stars are gone. Right? Jalen Ramsey's not here anymore. Teron Armstead's not here anymore. And so I just don't know what this is all supposed to be and how it's all supposed to fit together. This team is $27 million over the 2026 cap right now. And there are certain things that they'll do to handle that, right? Tyreek Hill is like a $50 million cap hit next year. He'll either be extended or he will be released. But that brings me to my big question here. Who are the building blocks on this team? Like, who are the guys that you think you're going to be able to move forward with in 26 and 27 and feel good about? Who are the good, established rookie contract players on the Dolphins?
It's just chop. Like in terms of guys who are like,
H.N.
but
you
he's hurt all
ruined
the
it by
time.
saying
That's it.
rookie contract, so I got
Like,
nothing. Yeah.
Listen, I love Devon Achane when he's on the field, but he's a smaller guy who's not on the field as much as you would like him to. Like in terms of guys that we have seen be relatively healthy and really good, it's kind of just chop.
This team has such a short runway for what it can be because of how it's built. And I don't even feel good about their short-term chances. And we'll get to the existential stuff here in a second, but that's what's keeping me up at night, is this was already a stars and scrubs team, and now it has fewer stars. And I just think what you're trying to do and what you're trying to pull off, the high wire act necessary for this to be a potential playoff team and for you to achieve your goals, I just think is so, so hard to do. What are you watching the first month of the season with these Dolphins, David?
So we have a tendency to do this at the wide receiver position, and I completely understand why. There are so many amazing ones. There's more than ever before, and it just feels like they keep coming. And two more jump into the league every year. You know, this time last year, Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. were ifs, and now we view them as big time, like very good receivers. So in that landscape, if you have a down year, later, bye. I don't want to hear about you.
It's so true. You're just dead.
Yeah.
It's over for you.
The quickness with which we just write a guy, it's like, oh, he's only like the 16th best receiver in the league. Screw this guy. So obviously I'm talking about Tyreek Hill. It was undeniably a down year. He played through an injury. It was very pedestrian, and especially by his standards, it was shockingly normal, right? Like you didn't see any of the regular Tyreek Hill stuff, any of the run after catch, any of the 80-yard house calls. And on top of that, we have to acknowledge that the relationship seems like it's soured a little bit, right? I mean, Tyreek,
the vibes are rotten, period, and he is not contributing to it in a good way.
I'm pretty confident saying that I think the Dolphins probably tried to move on from Tyreek. It's just he's on the wrong side of 30. He's got a big contract. He's a tough guy to move, and so I think the Dolphins probably looked at it and they're like, all right, well, it's not the worst consolation prize to be stuck with a very dangerous deep threat wide receiver if that's the situation that we're in. And to be fair to him and to them, I'm not ready to just say Tyreek Hill lost it. I'm really not. Like if you go and look at his like the advanced numbers from last year, it looks about right. Like I don't have a good reason for why last year was so bad, but the yards per reception, the air yards per target, the yak per reception, that one was a little bit worse, but it was still close to some of his other years. So I think he's probably still got some juice. I mean, if you extrapolate his numbers for a full healthy Tua season, and obviously that's a big part of it, right? Tua missed several games. If Tua plays all of last year, you're talking about a 90 catch, 1,100-yard season for Tyreek Hill, which is right in line with what you would expect. Well, I mean, it's not as great as a couple of his Dolphins years, but it's a perfectly good season. And so what I'm looking at in the first month of the season is like, are we burying Tyreek Hill a little bit too early? And I won't be surprised if the answer is yes. Like maybe he doesn't have a ton of time left, but I think it's totally possible that he's got another year or two left in his bag.
Why I think this is particularly important, it goes back to my last point. With the stars and scrubs thing, like if Tyreek Hill is not a superstar with the way that you have built this team, the rest of it is irrelevant. it just starts, it ceases to matter. Yeah. And so I think watching what that looks like over the first month is perfect. Mine is something we've danced around a little bit when I'm watching the first month of the season. It's just how many of the we need this to work moves for the Dolphins actually work. Jonas Avenay and the trade up you made for him. Hilton and Melifonwu being spot starters for you on these cheap deals. The Darren Waller Hail Mary. Like, how many of these actually work? Because if several of them do, I do think that there is a path for this team, even if it's narrow. If most of them don't, then I think that we're looking at a pretty rough, disappointing, hard-to-watch season for elements of this roster.
They are trying to hit the nastiest parlay to be like a 10-win team. It's like the way that I feel about this roster. I don't love it.
I love this. It's such a great comparison because the way that I have looked at how they've handled this offseason is the way that I would look at my buddy with a gambling problem. Where it's like, yeah, man, this could work, but I cannot support how you're trying to do it.
Yeah, it's like I could look at the 6 individual things and be like, I guess that could happen. But then altogether, it's like, okay, you sound insane. You need to talk to somebody.
Mike McDaniel's just like, we've had a rough couple of hours, but this is how we're going to climb out of it. It's fine. It's like, buddy, the sun's coming up. Let's just call it a day.
Yeah, he's your buddy at the sports book who just got his head in his hands. That's exactly where Mike McDaniel is right now. What counts as a successful season, David, for the 2025 Miami Dolphins?
You can call it a cop-out if you want to, but what Stephen Ross said at the end of last season is etched in my brain. I've mentioned it on the show before, but remember, the Dolphins finished just outside the playoff field. They were 8-9. They were alive on the final afternoon of the season. And Stephen Ross thought it was necessary to say after the game ended that like, hey, I'm not firing Chris Greer and Mike McDaniel. I just need you to know that. And then his direct quote was, continuity and leadership is not to be confused with an acceptance that the status quo is good enough. So that's what the owner said. So who am I to say that anything short of a playoff berth is going to be good enough? Because clearly the owner expects this team in the playoffs, whether it's fair or not.
I can see them potentially being a playoff team. We've talked about that. I think there is a path for them to do that, Derrik.
But, like, who gives a shit? Like, it doesn't, like, to what end is a playoff if they scrape into the playoffs in worse condition than they have done in, like, 2022 or 2023, when those teams got smacked when it matters, and then they get here, and you said they're, what, $27 million over next year's cap? And again, I know that they can fudge that and some of that stuff, but they don't have that many clear, like, building blocks. It's like, to what end does a 9 or 10 win season wild card berth even give you? I don't know, man. It's hard. It's very hard for me to get excited about a team that could comfortably be over 500.
I threw out on Twitter earlier today just a joke about the outline and my prep for this show. And in the what is a successful season for the Dolphins, I said I truly have no idea. And somebody responded, and I think this is right. They could be picking first in the draft, or they could be a wild card team. Like, I think that both of those things are on the table for the Dolphins, and I don't think I can say that for a lot of teams. The Mike McDaniel and Chris Grier part of this, like, what is success for them? We talked about this a little bit with the Giants yesterday. It's not that interesting to me to look at it through that lens. I'd rather look at it in a vacuum. Like, what is success for the Dolphins if I was trying to lay it out? Here's what I would say. This is like my devil's advocate point. I don't even know if I believe this, but I think this is maybe what would make Dolphins fans feel good. You walk out of this season feeling really good about Tua when he's healthy. Like, this offense has been good when he has been healthy. Like, he's somebody that, okay, even at this price tag, he's in that Jared Goff sort of group of quarterbacks where we know we can win with this guy if the right pieces are around him. Like, we continue to feel good about that. I think that's a box you have to check. And then the other part of this is you start developing a cache of young players that you feel decent about. Like, these guys that are kind of unknowns right now, Patrick Paul, Jonas Savaiinaea, Kenneth Grant. Is there going to be a core of 6, 7, 8 guys that as we hit a soft reset here with some of the Tyreek Hill and aging players moving on, we can pivot quickly because we found the right pieces. They have a 4th-round comp pick for Javon Holland. They have a 3rd-rounder that they got in the Woody Marks trade for the Texans. Like, is there going to be, when we're having this conversation next year, can I ask you guys who are the young building blocks for the Dolphins with the same tone as I just did today? I think that, to me, marks success for the long-term health of the franchise.
And I really don't think it's as bleak as it might sound. The big question for me is just, are Mike McDaniel and Chris Grier gonna lead that reset, right? Like,
that's my big question too.
Yeah, that's what we don't know right now. But if you move past that uncertainty, if Tua's good and healthy and what you just said comes to pass with some of the young players, I think the long-term outlook for the Dolphins can be fine, even if the present outlook is just very strange.
Where we get with Mike McDaniel by the end of the season, I'm fascinated by. Like, I think you could get to a place where even if this doesn't go right, you still convince yourself he's the best coach for this team moving forward because they just don't have the personnel to be consistently successful. If that's the end game here, I'm okay with that. I'm much more concerned with how this team has been built than with how this team has been coached. And sometimes you throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to those decisions at the highest level.
That feels the last thing I'll say is that feels a little bit like what has happened with Cleveland, where again, like so many things have gone wrong for them, but it's like they kept Kevin Stefanski, and if you look at just the record, it's like he should be fired, but it's like, well, I think Kevin Stefanski's a good coach, so I wouldn't want to fire him.
Andrew Berry has drafted abysmally. I'm not even going to say this. Let's just cut this. I was going to say other than the Deshaun Watson trade, I can understand the process here.
Bad, yeah.
It doesn't matter. Yes.
It's all bad.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think that's a very good comparison. And listen, Andrew Berry, I think there are plenty of mistakes, and the draft record is horrible, and obviously the Watson trade. But I think in terms of process with most of the other stuff that they've done, it's a little bit easier for me to get on board with that compared to a lot of things that the Dolphins have done. The Deshaun Watson, other than the Deshaun Watson trade is other than like how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln, but I do think I feel a little bit better about the leadership in Cleveland collectively than I do about the leadership in Miami. I guess that's what I would say. Thanks for watching The Athletic Football Show. Subscribe to the channel to keep up with us. Like and comment on this video, and we'll see you next time.